January 24th, 1848. I reached my hand down and picked it up. It made my heart thump, for I was certain it was gold. The piece was about half the size and shape of a pea. Then I saw another. After making the greatest find in the history of the West, Marshall and the other workers went back to work.
Tensions were strong, and dramatic events caused our nation to be on the brink of war. During the 1880s, 21st President Chester A. Arthur signed an act known as the Chinese Exclusion Act. This act prevented Chinese immigrants from entering the U.S., but many came in through illegal ways of travel, such as by a boat. The act was meant to last for 10 years, but was renewed as the Geary Act in 1892, which extended the act by another 10 years. This process will be continued until it is repealed in 1943. The Chinese Exclusion Act was implemented because many Chinese immigrants came for the California Gold Rush. The Gold Rush brought many immigrants from different parts of the world, such as South America and Asia. Discrimination against Chinese immigrants had begun many years back when the California Gold Rush had demanded a large amount of labor. Chinese immigrants were first welcomed as reliable workers, and they did all kinds of jobs, such as mining, building, and starting their own stores. And during that time, they were even favored in trading in the US. But then, things changed. As many Chinese immigrants began to find success, American workers started to find them as a threat. Many politicians and labor leaders denounced the immigrants for driving down wages, and violence against the Chinese was becoming more and more common. In 1884, a white man was convicted for killing a Chinese worker, but was overturned by the California Supreme Court, holding that Chinese eyewitness testimony was inadmissible. Chinese citizen Che Jianping was ready to head back to the United States. He grabbed everything he needed for his departure and started to set sail. Che Jianping had gone to China to reconnect with his friends and family, and when he returned to San Francisco on October 8, 1888, he was faced with guards telling them to get back on the ship and leave. It turns out that President Clover had just signed the Scott Act a few days earlier, which prohibited Chinese immigrants who were abroad on trips to return to the US. This policy threatened to separate many families and friends, and so Che Jianping challenged the ruling, beginning a legal battle for the rights of Chinese immigrants. The political cartoon shown above is the famous Uncle Sam, and he seems to be kicking a Chinese immigrant out of America. This cartoon was created during that time period, and Uncle Sam holds the proclamation of the Chinese Exclusion Act. Many Americans were jealous and began to see Chinese people as a threat because of the newfound success that they had found in America. And so they created the Chinese Exclusion Act and wanted all the Chinese people out of America. When the Chinese Exclusion Act expired in 1892, Congress extended it for 10 years in the form of the Geary Act. The Geary Act was made permanent in 1902 and added restrictions by requiring each Chinese resident to register and obtain a certificate of residence. Without a certificate, she or he faced deportation. By this time, anti-Chinese agitation had quieted. In 1943, Congress repealed all the exclusion acts, leaving a yearly limit of 105 Chinese to come into America, and gave foreign-born Chinese the right to seek naturalization. The so-called national origin system, with various modifications, lasted until Congress passed the Immigration Act of 1965. The Immigration Act of 1990 provided the most comprehensive change in the legal immigration since 1965. The Act established a flexible worldwide cap on family-based, employment-based, and diversity immigrant visas. The Act further provides that visas for any single foreign state in these categories may not exceed 7% of the total available. Many people fought against America, declaring that this act was wrong. Che Jianping was famous for going all the way up to Supreme Court, but then was overturned. After Che Jianping had heard about the Scott Act, he immediately went to get a certificate that allowed him re-entry. But once he got the certificate and presented it to the United States, he was denied entry and was detained on board by Captain Walker. The short-term impact significantly decreased the number of Chinese immigrants in the United States and forbade those who left the United States to ever return. Although the Chinese Exclusion Act was a bad event in history, we cannot deny that it helps us learn about the past and how discrimination happens everywhere. Discrimination is a long-term impact that the Chinese Exclusion Act left us, but together, we can stop and end discrimination for all. The Chinese Exclusion Act talks about how many Chinese immigrants fought against the racial injustice and tried to change the law, but inevitably failed. The act has sparked many into debate on whether it was the right action to take, but in the end, everything encourages us to end discrimination. Thank you.